A lot of people are going to be shocked by this, but one of my biggest regrets out of many when working on this channel was the fact that I've never gotten to make a video review for Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Regardless of the circumstances, alongside everyone else who watched the film in all of its comic stylized, effervescent glory, stretching the standards and crossing the boundaries of animation, utilizing a vast variety of art and media such as CG animation, hand-drawn animation, even anime. I'm here to inform you all in video form, thank God, that this was a movie that honored the legacy and reputation of the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man while bringing forth to audiences and newcomers to the genre the characterization of the courageous upcoming underdog, Miles Morales. If it wasn't for the masterminds of Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, who have previously worked on animated movies in the past, like Cloudy with a Chance and Meatballs, and the surprisingly innovative The Lego Movie, Into the Spider-Verse wouldn't stand like a sacramental monolith over the animation empire as one of the most revolutionary animated films that have ever been devised, one of the best superhero films ever made, and Sony Pictures Animation's crowning achievement after producing a slew of average Hotel Transylvania sequels and other above-par animated films. Not to mention it has one of the best original songs of the entire past decade created by Post Malone. It's so good that I can hear it play in my head as I'm thinking about it right now. With the film pulverizing box office numbers and with its glorious accolades in hand, there was no doubt in anyone else's mind that a sequel will follow suit, with Lord and Miller being tasked to write something that has a much more complex and grander story than its predecessor. And making an animated sequel that can go on par with the original or even surpass the quality of it to the extent of being called a cinematic classic is extraordinarily rare to accomplish. The only ones who managed to achieve it were DreamWorks 4 times in a row and Pixar with its first 2 Toy Story sequels. However, if an experienced and dedicated auteur can put forth such unrelenting tenacity to summon one of the greatest pieces of animated brilliance pinned to the 21st century, then that lofty aspiration can become a reality, revered forever and all time. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, let me opine the following statement. The term game changer has been thrown around and hyperbolized for certain movies that in actuality don't exactly deserve that nomenclature. But without any sort of hesitation or an ounce of me even stuttering, Spider-Man Across the Spiderverse is an absolute game changer of the animated medium and will join alongside the likes of Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio and Puss in Boots: The Last Wish as one of the best animated films of the decade. Shattering the molds of how animated pictures should be made in the 2020s, it is a unspeakable, monumental achievement in Sony's animated library and a glorious, masterful example of how to craft an animated sequel that reaches the heights of its predecessor. But what is this movie about? Well, like every other Spider-Man backstory explained in Into the Spider-Verse, let's take it from the top. We resume with Miles Morales trying to balance his everyday Spider-Man responsibilities of fighting crime, making time for school, concealing his identity, and living up to his parents' expectations. Luckily, he comes across Gwen Stacy from the last movie, who explains to him that she is a part of a league of Spider-Men and women across the multiverse called the Spider Society, led by Miguel O'Hara and Jess Drew. However, once Miles tags along with Gwen to defeat the Spot, a nemesis with omnipresent powers that threatens the lives of the multiverse, it isn't until Miles discovers the true purpose of the Spider Society that his whole worldview begins to change. One of the ingenious parts about the previous Spider-Verse story lied within its storytelling, crossing a very cohesive multiverse story with a very captivating origin story for Miles Morales. Since we've last arrived at a sequel, it was likely that the plot was going to approach to a much more dark and complex situation that further expands our understanding of the characters that we've seen in 2018 and would explore more of the Spider-Verse and the overall Spider Society's reason of existence. From recent reports, Lord and Miller and David Callahan's script would appear to head towards that direction. However, they've also noted that seeing how the story that they have written was so long, they couldn't find a way to compound the entire story into an appropriate animated film runtime, which in turn would lead to them eventually splitting the entire story into 2 parts. So what we have here is a film marketed somewhat like Dune 2021, or in superhero terms, Avengers Infinity War, where it is part one of a much larger and more in-depth narrative. Keep that information in mind because that will be important for the last segment of this review. And the final product is mind-blowing, mature in every single discernible respect, and it doesn't pull a punch even once. The sincere, character-driven plot takes on so many ambitious risks that audiences do not expect in an animated family movie, and effortlessly achieves it. Every execution for the character development and the characterization in this film is simply brilliant, whether it's for Miles' inner conflict with his double life responsibilities, or being faced with the grim reality that he doesn't know if he could change, or the extended character depth of Gwen Stacy via her personal life and her dramatic tension between her friends and her family. And the film keeps you on your toes, bracing for whatever in-character decision that they have to make. And by the time that the third act rolls around, and without going further into too much detail, you are introduced to gut-punching, eye-popping twists that take you completely by surprise, that both make narrative and thematic sense, and adheres logically and consistently with how the film makes its multiverse authentic. It's one of the finest narratives that delivers on visual storytelling for anything related to the animation genre that I have seen in the 2020s or in any year, whether it be for a TV show or for an animated feature film. Narrative aside, everyone who's seen the previous Spiderverse movie note that the one thing that made that film so special was its animation, and how it was able to not only imagine that the audiences themselves are in a three-dimensional comic book in motion, but in the way that it was able to go against the grain and mix other artistic styles into every frame. And Across the Spiderverse's tremendous animation is present and accounted for, but it is done to such a masterful, flawless level of execution. The animation and the art direction in this movie is so perfect that it's almost surreal. When you witness this movie, even by the time that you purchase this movie, when it gets released on Blu-ray, you can pause the film and you can go frame by frame, and you would notice the small yet magnificent subtle details that go into every single drawing, pixel, background, and 3D model. From the Ben-Day dots surrounding a character, the sketch marks on a character's costume, to the swooshing outline as a character is swinging across the city, to Miles' mother's snap outline resembling the Puerto Rican flag. Every single opportunity that the animators take when utilizing and constructing the animation for this film is mesmerizing to say the least. And some of those details especially shine in the beautiful storyboarding where every single frame looks like a majestic piece of art, and with the action sequences, more importantly, the Spider Society chase scene, which as time goes on will be remembered fondly as one of the greatest sequences that have ever transpired in a Spider-Man movie. The animation also at a point becomes downright experimental, not in the vein of being artsy or meretricious, but in the sense of encapsulating a character's emotional state. For example, on Gwen's dimension, when she is having thoughts about something or when she's having an interaction with a family member, the colors of the background and even her character model change depending on her or the other character's mood, even to the point of adding watercolor effects dripping down during a very emotional scene. It's a poignant touch by the animation team at Sony, and it's one of the best work that they have ever concocted in an animated film in years, if not decades. Not just yet, but some of the best use of art direction, especially with regard to the last film, was the way of how the writers take advantage of how the characters and the worlds are animated inside of the Spider-Verse. With Across's new attempts, they make your brain explode in astonishment. Such amazing examples include the work of Spider-Punk, being animated through a series of images being stitched and compiled together to look like a collage harkening back to the London's 70s and 80s punk era, which makes sense given that his character and his world in the comics was the Sex Pistols. You'll also have an Italian Renaissance vulture that was made through Leonardo da Vinci inspired drawings. You'll also have the world of Mumbattan, which is a mixture between Mumbai and Manhattan, replicating the 70s comic art style in a Southern Asian setting, to even, not spoiling it whatsoever, but let's just say that it involves stop motion. Let's just put it at that. You'll wait and see. It should also be noticed that alongside the animation and the story, the voice actors stepped up their game in their performances. Shameik Moore still manages to encapsulate Miles Morales terrifically and arrest the audience with his dramatic and jovial line delivery. Haley Steinfeld is wonderful and captivating as Gwen Stacy as per usual. Jake Johnson makes for a hilarious return as Peter B. Parker, but the knockout highlight is Oscar Isaac as Miguel O'Hara, portraying a very stoic, fierce, and fascinating character given the circumstances of his tragic past, and carrying the duty and the leadership that he has in the Spider Society and even the Spiderverse as a whole. And let's not sleep on Jason Schwartzman, who plays Dr. Jonathan Ahn, or simply known as the Spot, who does very well at the first act, giving a very quirky and reserved performance given the presence of him being what the film calls him earlier on as a villain of the week. However, throughout the story, once you realize his backstory and the kind of capabilities that he can use with his powers as they go stronger with every passing moment, Schwartzman and the script transform the Spot into a very intimidating and harrowing antagonist. And what better way to establish those tones than with Daniel Pemberton's majestic score. It's a heart-pounding majesty of composition, combining all different sorts of genres from synths to instrumental to techno to orchestral, and fits every single scene depending on the mood, whether it be a very intimate and personal one-on-one conversation, a looming horrific threat, or an exciting action scene. Coinciding with that, the humor is also very well placed and never came across as being forced and unnecessary, with some of the jokes and even moments that catch you off guard that are so terrifically executed. Never in a long time in a movie theater, especially when it's a superhero movie or any movie, where myself and an audience full of people would roar at the screen with spontaneous laughter. It was an experience that quite reminded me of the superhero films back in the day that I used to laugh at. If only the modern MCU did the exact same thing. A final point I want to address. Earlier on, I stated that this was part one of a much larger and extended story. Well, in this movie, the film does end on a cliffhanger. And it's one of those cliffhangers that is either going to make you excited for what's going to happen in the next movie, or it's going to make you feel angered and upset at the fact that they ended this way and that you didn't know that it was a part one. Even though the director stated in December 2021 that it was going to be a part one of two, and that in the first look trailer of Across the Spiderverse, they even showed a part one subtitle underneath before just changing it later on to just Across the Spiderverse. Based on my judgment, I think the cliffhanger was executed well, and I think it sets up perfectly of what to expect further down the road. As to where they put it, I understood perfectly as to why they had to end it at this specific moment, given where the characters ended up. And quite frankly, I'm prepared to see what Lord and Miller have up their sleeves for the conclusion of Miles' story. What else can be said about Across the Spiderverse that hasn't been repeated by millions of people across the globe? It is a superb Spider-Man movie in every single conceivable regard, shattering the barriers of what kind of revolutionary and innovative ways that the animation industry can concoct with its genre, and summoning some of the most mature and powerful stories in the superhero subgenre. Sony should be proud of themselves for making something so breathtaking that by any means necessary, it is your obligation right now to go out of your way to the most crowded theater possible on the largest screen ever to witness one of the best films of the year. And as for Disney and Illumination, I can't believe I'm saying this, but in the words of Snoop Dogg, step your game up. My name is Luke Nukem, and you, my friends, have been blown away.